always believed love was built on trust, but tonight that illusion shattered into a million pieces. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the pictures on my phone. Lucas, my husband, the man I gave my entire life to, wrapped around another woman like she was his entire world. Vanessa Hart. Wealthy. Powerful. The kind of woman men like Lucas always dreamed of. And I was just the wife he settled for. My heart pounded as I stood outside the Grand Hotel, rain soaking through my coat. I shouldn't have come here. I should have stayed home, pretended I didn't know, played the part of the oblivious, devoted wife. But I needed to see it for myself. And there they were, walking out of the hotel lobby laughing. His hand rested on the small of her back, guiding her with the same touch he once reserved for me. Lucas. My voice barely carried over the rain, but he heard me. He turned, and for a moment something flickered in his expression. Shock, maybe guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Elena, he said, like I was an old acquaintance he ran into by chance. Vanessa didn't even have the decency to look surprised. She just smirked, tightening her grip on his arm, like she had already won. I took a shaky step forward, my pulse deafening in my ears. How long? Elena not here. How long? My voice cracked, but I refused to break, refused to let the tears spill. Lucas exhaled sharply, glancing around as if my presence was nothing more than an inconvenience. It doesn't matter. It felt like someone had driven a knife straight through my chest. The man who once whispered promises against my skin now looked at me like I was a problem he needed to get rid of. Vanessa tilted her head, her voice like silk. You're making a scene. I wanted to scream, to slap the smug satisfaction off her face, to remind her that I was his wife. But then Lucas did the one thing I never expected. He gently took Vanessa's hand in his and turned to me, his eyes colder than the rain pouring down on us. I never loved you, Elena. The world stopped. The cold seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my chest. You're lying, I whispered. You're saying this because she's here. Lucas's jaw tightened. I'm saying it because it's the truth. I married you because it was convenient. Because you were safe. But Vanessa, he looked at her with something I hadn't seen in years. Passion. Desire. She makes me feel alive. A bitter laugh crawled up my throat. I wanted to believe this was some cruel dream, that I'd wake up and find Lucas beside me, complaining about work like he always did. But this was real. And he wasn't coming home with me. I took a shaky step back, the rain blurring my vision. I gave you everything, I whispered. I stood by you when you had nothing. Lucas didn't even flinch. And now I have everything. It's time to move on. Something inside me snapped. The love I had for him burned away, leaving nothing but raw, unbearable pain. I turned on my heel and ran, the night swallowing my sobs. I don't remember getting into my car. I don't remember speeding through the streets, the city lights bleeding together as I gripped the wheel with white-knuckled hands. All I could hear was his voice, echoing over and over. I never loved you. The rain was relentless, pounding against the windshield, blurring everything ahead. I barely saw the red light before it was too late. The blaring horn. The screech of tires. The impact. Pain exploded through my body then. Nothing. Darkness swallowed me whole. The first thing I felt was warmth. Not the sterile cold of a hospital, not the aching weight of my broken body. Just warmth. Soft sheets cradled me, the scent of lavender filling the air. I wasn't dead. At least I didn't think I was. A slow pulse of pain throbbed at my temples as I forced my eyes open. Light flooded in, and for a moment, all I could see was white, curtains billowing against a large window, the midday sun casting golden streaks across a bedroom I didn't recognize. I tried to sit up, but my body felt wrong. Lighter. Stronger. My hands trembled as I lifted them to my face. Something was off. My skin felt softer, smoother. My fingers were longer, more delicate. And then I saw it. The mirror. It stood across the room, an ornate vanity draped with jewelry and perfume bottles. But none of that mattered. Not when my own reflection stared back at me, except it wasn't mine. The woman in the mirror had striking green eyes, framed by thick, dark lashes. High cheekbones. Plump lips painted a shade of deep red I never wore. And the hair, long silky waves of jet black. My breath hitched. I reached up, hesitantly running my fingers through it, and the woman in the mirror did the same. This wasn't me. A sharp knock at the door made me flinch. Before I could react, the door swung open and a woman in a maid's uniform rushed in. "Oh, Miss Scarlett. You're awake." "Scarlett?" The maid's eyes welled with tears as she hurried to my side. "We were so worried. The doctor said it was a miracle you survived the accident. You've been unconscious for days." Accident. My heart slammed against my ribs. Memories rushed in. A car crash, the screech of tires, the rain blurring my vision. I died. I know I died. But I was here. And I was in someone else's body. Panic crawled up my throat. Where am I? My voice came out softer, sultrier, nothing like the Elena Carter I used to be. The maid frowned. "You're at the Hayes estate, Mississippi. Your father has been terribly worried." Hayes. Scarlett Hayes. The name sent a chill down my spine. I knew it. Everyone knew it. Scarlett was infamous. A wealthy socialite constantly making headlines for the wrong reasons. Scandals, affairs, drama. The last I remembered, she had been in an accident. The world thought she might not survive. I had taken her place. The maid gently squeezed my hand. "You must be in shock, Mississippi. But don't worry, you're safe now." Safe? I didn't even know who I was anymore. My heart pounded, my mind racing. This was impossible. It had to be a dream. But the warmth of the sheets, the scent of lavender, the rapid beat of my own heart, it all felt too real. I wasn't Elena anymore. I was Scarlett. When I saw Lucas again, I almost forgot to breathe. The room was suffocating, gold chandeliers casting soft light over a sea of silk gowns and tailored suits. The clinking of champagne glasses, murmured conversations, the occasional flash of cameras. It was the kind of place Scarlett Hayes belonged. But I wasn't Scarlett. Not really. I had spent the past few weeks relearning myself, adjusting to a body that wasn't mine, a life that felt like a costume I hadn't quite grown into. Scarlett had a reputation. Reckless, spoiled, a beautiful disaster waiting to happen. If I wanted to survive, I had to play the part. Thought I was ready. I was wrong. Because the moment I turned toward the entrance, the air was stolen from my lungs. Lucas Reed. He walked in like he owned the room, his posture rigid, his sharp jawline tense as he scanned the crowd. His presence was commanding, just like I remembered, except now I saw him differently. The man who once held my heart, the man I had loved beyond reason, looked like a stranger to me now. And he wasn't alone. Vanessa Hart was on his arm, her manicured fingers resting possessively against his chest. She looked radiant, glowing with the satisfaction of a woman who had won. She smiled up at him, whispering something in his ear that made him smirk. That smirk, so familiar, so cruel. Hatred burned in my veins. I forced myself to breathe, to fix my posture, to remember who I was supposed to be. Scarlett Hayes wouldn't crumble. She wouldn't let a man like Lucas Reed steal the air from her lungs. So I reached for a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, tilted my chin up and turned, just as Lucas's gaze locked onto me. His steps faltered. For a split second, something flickered in his expression. Confusion, intrigue. Then his brows furrowed and he tilted his head slightly as if trying to place me. Good. I took a slow sip of my drink, pretending not to notice him, pretending he was just another man in the room. But I felt his eyes on me, studying me, drawn in like a moth to a flame he didn't understand. And then he moved. Vanessa was still speaking, but he wasn't listening anymore. He walked toward me, his presence like a shadow stretching across the floor. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass as he stopped just inches away. "You look familiar," he said, his voice low, unreadable. I smiled, tilting my head. "Do I?" His gaze swept over me, searching for something. Recognition, maybe. But he wouldn't find it. Not yet. "What's your name?" he asked. My lips curled into a slow, practiced smirk. "Scarlett." Lucas's jaw tensed. He was still watching me too closely, trying to figure out why I unsettled him. Good. Let him wonder. Let him feel what I felt when he let me die. I took another sip of champagne, then turned away first. Because this time I was the one walking away. I could still feel his eyes on me as I walked away. The weight of Lucas's gaze burned against my skin, like an itch I refused to scratch. Every step I took was deliberate, controlled. The sharp click of my heels against the marble floor echoing through the grand ballroom. I didn't need to turn around to know he was still watching. I wanted him to. But I wasn't here for him. Not yet. Impressive. The voice came from my left, smooth, deep, laced with amusement. A man stood at the bar watching me over the rim of his whiskey glass. Dark eyes, sharper than a blade, took me in with curiosity rather than lust. He was different from the men who usually looked at Scarlet Hayes. He wasn't impressed by beauty alone. He was trying to figure me out. I knew exactly who he was. Damian Wolf. Power broker. A man whose name alone could make lesser men tremble. If Lucas was ambitious, Damian was untouchable. Ruthless, brilliant, and always 5 steps ahead of everyone else. I slowed my steps, tilting my head as I met his gaze. Am I? He smirked, setting his drink down. I've been watching Lucas Reed long enough to know he doesn't get distracted easily. And yet there he was, staring at you like he'd seen a ghost. He paused, his smirk deepening. So tell me, what is it about you that rattles him? My fingers brushed the edge of the bar as I leaned in slightly. Maybe he just has a weakness for beautiful women. Damian chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Maybe. But I don't believe in coincidences. He studied me for a long moment, as if he could peel back my skin and see the truth underneath. A part of me wondered how much he already knew. Damian had a reputation for digging up secrets, and right now I was the biggest secret in the room. You don't strike me as the reckless type, he said finally. Scarlet Hayes used to be nothing more than a pretty face attached to a scandal. But you're different. I met his gaze head-on. People change. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, never looking away. Or maybe you're not her at all. The words sent a cold shiver down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I just smiled, tilting my glass toward him. You seem like a man who enjoys a mystery. He exhaled a quiet laugh. I do. Then lowering his voice, he leaned in slightly. And I think you and I could be useful to each other. I arched a brow. Is that so? Lucas is getting too comfortable. Vanessa's family is handing him power he hasn't earned. I don't like it. He set his glass down with a soft clink. And you have his full attention. So that was it. He saw an opportunity the same way I did. I pretended to consider it, swirling the champagne in my glass. But we both knew my answer before I even said it. I'm listening. The first crack in Lucas's perfect world came faster than I expected. It started small. Missed calls, subtle shifts in his schedule, his carefully curated control beginning to slip. The moment we locked eyes at that gala, I knew I had gotten under his skin. But I didn't just want to haunt him. I wanted to ruin him. And I wasn't alone. Damian moved quickly, laying the groundwork. Leaked documents exposing weaknesses in Lucas's company, whispers in the right circles about bad investments. Nothing that could be traced back to us. Just enough to make him sweat. And I played my role beautifully. The second time I saw Lucas was at a high-stakes charity event. One he was hosting. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I had a way of getting into places I didn't belong. And when I arrived, heads turned. Vanessa was at his side, perfectly styled, perfectly poised. But even from across the room I saw the tension in Lucas's shoulders. He was distracted. By me. I let him stew in it. Pretended I didn't notice when his gaze lingered too long, when his jaw tensed every time I laughed at something Damian whispered in my ear. I was a ghost wrapped in silk and diamonds, walking through his life like I had every right to be there. And then I struck. I waited until I knew he would follow. The balcony was quiet, the city sprawling beneath us in glittering lights. The air was thick with tension before he even stepped outside. Who are you? His voice was low, demanding, edged with something he didn't understand. I turned slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. His eyes burned into me, searching, desperate. He didn't even realize what he was asking. You already know, I murmured. His breath hitched. He covered it quickly, masking it with frustration, but I saw it. I felt it. This game you're playing. He took a step closer, his jaw tightening. I don't like being toyed with. I smiled, tilting my head. Then stop chasing me. His fingers twitched at his sides. He wouldn't. He couldn't. I could see it now, the unraveling. He was slipping just like I wanted. His world, so carefully built, was cracking. And the best part? He had no idea that I was the one holding the hammer. The walls around Lucas were closing in. I could see it in the way he carried himself. Tense, distracted, no longer the man who walked through life with effortless control. His world was shifting, tilting, and he didn't even know why. Not yet. But I did. And the final push came in the form of a single envelope. Damien had it delivered straight to me, no return address, no name attached. Just a sleek black envelope with my name on it. Scarlett's name. I opened it in my suite, fingers steady even as my heart pounded. Inside was a single photograph. A car, mine, or rather Elena's, crushed beyond recognition from the accident that should have killed me. I had seen the wreck before, but this wasn't just another shot from the reports. No, this one was different. Because there was a second car parked just a few feet away. And standing next to it was Vanessa. The date stamped on the corner of the photo sent a chill through me. He had been there. She had watched. My blood turned to ice as I reached for the second paper tucked inside. A report, brief but damning. A bribe paid to a mechanic. A request to ensure the brakes fail. I gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in my fist. She hadn't just stolen Lucas. She had tried to erase me. The weight of it settled deep in my chest, anger so sharp it cut through my ribs. I had spent weeks playing this game carefully, weaving my way back into Lucas's world, making him feel my presence. But this changed everything. I didn't just want him to suffer anymore. I wanted her to burn. That night I made sure I was somewhere I knew Lucas would find me. A private lounge, dimly lit, filled with the city's most powerful players. I didn't have to wait long. He found me at the bar, his eyes dark, heavy with something between frustration and obsession. He didn't even try to mask it anymore. "You're in my head," he admitted, voice rough, like he hated the words even as they left his lips. I turned slowly, my lips curling. "Good." He exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "Who are you?" I leaned in just enough that he had to do the same, close enough that he could smell the perfume he once bought for her. "Elena Carter." His breath caught. For a moment he didn't move, didn't blink. The disbelief, the shock, the sheer impossibility of it all. It flickered across his face like a storm he couldn't control. And then, before he could recover, I slid the photograph onto the bar between us. He looked down. Then froze. His fingers trembled as he picked it up, his eyes scanning the image. And when he finally looked back at me, there was something new in his gaze. Fear. I had seen Lucas angry before. I had seen him ruthless, cold, indifferent. But never like this. His hand clenched around the photograph, his breathing uneven, his pulse visible at the base of his throat. For the first time since I came back, he wasn't in control. And I let the silence stretch, watching him unravel one piece at a time. "How did you get this?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I tilted my head, watching him carefully. "Does it matter?" His jaw tightened. "Vanessa." He cut himself off, swallowing hard. His fingers twitched like he wanted to rip the photograph apart, destroy the evidence, pretend it wasn't real. But he couldn't. Because it was real. His perfect fiancée had been there. Had watched me die. Had planned for it. And suddenly all those carefully built walls he had surrounded himself with, the power, the control, the lies, were shaking beneath his feet. "Good." I stood slowly, reaching for my drink, taking a slow sip as his gaze followed my every movement. He was looking at me differently now, no longer just intrigued, no longer just suspicious. He was searching for something. Searching for her. For me. "Elena's dead." His voice was rough, like he was trying to convince himself as much as he was trying to convince me. I smiled. "Are you sure?" He flinched. "Barely. But I saw it." His breathing came faster now, his fingers flexing at his sides. I had never seen Lucas Reed undone before. He had always been composed, always in control. But right now he was standing on the edge of something dangerous, and I was the one who put him there. I leaned in just close enough that he could feel my breath against his skin. "Tell me, Lucas. Why do I feel so familiar to you?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He was staring at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve, like he needed to touch me to prove I wasn't real. I let the moment linger, let the tension coil between us before stepping back. And then I walked away. I felt his gaze on me long after I left the room. I knew he wouldn't be able to stop thinking about me now. And that was exactly what I wanted. I could feel it happening. The shift. The slow, inevitable unraveling of Lucas Reed. He was slipping, losing himself in the questions he didn't dare speak aloud. The man who once dismissed me, who let me die without hesitation, was now chasing shadows of a past he couldn't escape. I saw it in the way he sought me out. At first, it was subtle, glances across crowded rooms, his presence lingering too long wherever I went. Then it became undeniable. Calls to Damien under the guise of business, hoping I would be nearby. Invitations to events he never would have considered before. And when he did find me, it was always the same. That searching gaze. That tightening of his jaw. That flicker of something he couldn't name but refused to ignore. He was beginning to believe. But I needed him to know. So I let him. Left just enough crumbs for him to follow. A phrase Elena used to say, spoken in passing. A scent he once traced along my skin, now lingering in the air when I walked by. A look, one he once saw in my eyes, reflected back at him through scarlet haze. And Lucas? He was unraveling beautifully. I caught him one night, pacing outside a gallery I had no reason to be at, his fingers twitching like a man on the verge of losing his mind. He had followed me here whether he realized it or not. And I let him. Elena had a painting just like this, I murmured, stopping beside him, my voice soft, thoughtful. Lucas stiffened, his gaze snapping to me. I tilted my head, keeping my expression unreadable as I studied the art on the wall. A quiet, unremarkable painting. One that had once hung in my office. Our office, before he threw it all away. His breath hitched. I felt it before I even turned to look at him. The moment of recognition. The ice slipping through his veins. How do you know that? His voice was barely above a whisper. I let the silence stretch, let him sink into his own fear before finally meeting his gaze. Maybe you should ask Vanessa. His entire body tensed. I saw it then, the doubt sinking in, the walls closing around him. He was starting to wonder, starting to fear the impossible. And that fear, it was exactly what I needed. I knew Vanessa would come for me. It was only a matter of time. The moment Lucas started pulling away from her, the moment doubt crept into his perfect little world, she must have felt it, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And Vanessa Hart didn't wait for storms to destroy her. She destroyed them first. The first attempt was subtle. A warning. A whispered threat from a stranger as I left an event. Walk away while you still can. Amusing, really. As if I hadn't already died once. The second attempt wasn't subtle at all. I was walking to my car, the garage nearly empty, the air thick with silence. I had just reached for the door handle when I heard it, footsteps. Fast. Approaching. Instinct took over. I turned just as a figure lunged from the shadows, a gloved hand reaching for me. I didn't think. I reacted. The heel of my palm struck his nose, a sickening crunch splitting the air. He staggered, cursing, and I didn't wait to see if he'd recover. I ran. Headlights flooded the garage as Damien's car screeched to a stop in front of me. The door flew open and I dove inside just as the attacker stumbled to his feet, blood dripping from his face. Damien didn't ask questions. He hit the gas. For the first time since I came back, I felt it, real raw rage. Not at Lucas. Not at my past. But at her. Vanessa wasn't just playing defense anymore. He was trying to erase me again. I gripped my seatbelt, my breath uneven as the city lights blurred past. Damien's hands were tight on the wheel, his expression unreadable, but his voice was calm. She's getting desperate. I exhaled a laugh, sharp and humorless. She should be. He glanced at me then, something dark flashing in his eyes. I can handle this. I met his gaze, steady. No, my fingers uncurled slowly, my heart slowing to something dangerous. This is mine. Vanessa Hart wanted to end me. She was about to learn what it felt like to be haunted. The next time I saw Lucas, he looked like a man on the verge of collapse. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his usual confidence fraying at the edges. He had spent the past few days spiraling, digging into Vanessa's past, chasing ghosts, chasing me. And now, standing in the dimly lit corridor of the hotel where I had been staying, he looked at me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. I need to talk to you. His voice was rough, almost desperate. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You found something, didn't you? His jaw clenched. The accident. He swallowed hard. Elena's accident. The way he said my name, it was different now. No longer just a memory, no longer something buried in the past. It was real. I was real. I tilted my head, watching him unravel in real time. And his throat worked as he struggled to form the words. Vanessa was there. He exhaled shakily, rubbing a hand over his face. She paid someone to tamper with the brakes. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. I let the moment stretch, let him sit in the weight of his own realization. His betrayal. His blind devotion to a woman who had tried to erase me from existence. And then finally I spoke. And you let me die for her. Lucas flinched like I had struck him. The air between us crackled, charged with something heavy, something dangerous. His eyes searched mine, pleading like he wanted to find something, anything, that would let him take it back. I didn't know, he whispered. A bitter laugh slipped past my lips. You didn't want to know. He took a step forward, hesitation flickering across his face, but I didn't move. I wanted him to feel it. The weight of everything he had done. I thought you didn't love me, he admitted, his voice hoarse. I thought, he swallowed, his gaze burning into mine. I was wrong. I stared at him, unmoving. I had spent so long hating him, wanting him to suffer. And now here he was breaking apart in front of me, realizing, too late, what he had thrown away. Lucas Reed was finally sorry. But I wasn't sure I cared anymore. Lucas reached for me, but I stepped back. I saw the way his fingers curled, hesitation locking him in place. He wanted to touch me, to pull me closer, to fix something that had shattered beyond repair. But I wasn't the woman he used to hold. Not anymore. His voice was raw when he spoke. Elena. Almost made me laugh. Almost. He was saying my name like it was something sacred now, something precious, after tossing it away so easily when I was gasping for air, trapped in the wreckage of my own life. You don't get to say my name like that, I whispered. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. For once, Lucas Reed had nothing to say. Good. I turned toward the door, fingers gripping the handle, but his voice stopped me. Please. That one word. A plea. Lucas Reed begging. I glanced back over my shoulder, watching him with cold detachment. He looked nothing like the man I used to love. And maybe that was the worst part. Knowing I had spent years giving my heart to someone who had never truly known how to hold it. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he said quietly. I know I was a coward. I should have seen the truth. I should have protected you. His throat bobbed, his breath unsteady. But I can now. I turned fully, arms crossing over my chest. And what exactly do you think you're protecting me from? Vanessa, he bit out, his expression darkening. She knows. She's losing control and she's desperate. If you don't stop. A slow, humorless smile curled my lips. She's desperate. I took a step forward, just enough to watch his body tense. You think I'm the one in danger? I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to something softer, something sharper. Vanessa should be afraid of me. His breath caught. Because for the first time I saw it in his eyes. Recognition. He had always looked at me like a mystery, a puzzle he was trying to solve. But now for the first time he understood. I wasn't just haunting him. I was here to bury them. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Lucas turned sharply, already on edge, but I didn't flinch. I had been waiting for this. The door swung open and there she was. Vanessa Hart. She was breathtaking as always, not a single hair out of place. Her red lips curled into something sweet, something venomous. But her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were unreadable. She stepped inside like she owned the room, barely sparing Lucas a glance before her gaze locked onto mine. Scarlett Hayes. Elena Carter. She saw me. Really saw me. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing us inside. So, Vanessa murmured, tilting her head. This is what a ghost looks like. Lucas stiffened beside me, but I smiled. No, Vanessa. I took a slow, measured step toward her, never breaking eye contact. This is what vengeance looks like. For the first time since my return, I saw it in her eyes. Fear. She masked it well, but I knew. Vanessa laughed, a slow, controlled sound that barely masked the tension beneath. Vengeance, she repeated, crossing her arms like I was something amusing, something small. You think you've won? I didn't blink. I know I have. Her jaw tightened, but her smirk stayed in place. And what exactly do you think you're going to do? I leaned in just enough that she could hear the venom laced in my voice. I already did it. Her phone buzzed. Once. Then again. A third time. Her fingers twitched at her side before she finally snatched it from her purse. I watched her expression shift as she read whatever was on the screen. Eyes narrowing, lips parting, her breath hitching for just a second before she locked it all down. She looked at me, a mask of practiced indifference, but I saw the crack. I sent the proof to the press, I said softly. Every record. Every bribe. Every crime. It's over, Vanessa. She exhaled sharply through her nose, shaking her head. You really think I'll go down that easily? You won't have a choice, Lucas said. His voice was cold, final. Vanessa turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. And you, she murmured, tilting her head. Look at you. Standing on her side. She took a slow step closer, lowering her voice. You really think she'll take you back, Lucas? Silence. I felt him stiffen beside me, but I didn't look at him. Vanessa turned her gaze back to me, eyes gleaming. That's what this was really about, wasn't it? Making him suffer so you could forgive him. She let out a quiet chuckle. But you and I both know how this ends, Elena. You don't forgive him. You never forgive him. I stared at her, the weight of everything pressing against my ribs. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong. Because I had spent so long hating Lucas. Hating the way he let me die. Hating the way he was only realizing his mistakes now when it was too late. And it was too late. I turned to him, meeting his gaze fully for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. His eyes searched mine, desperate, pleading, filled with something that might have been love but had come far too late. Elena. I shook my head. You let me die. His breath faltered. I let the words settle between us, let him feel the weight of them, let him finally understand that there was no undoing what had been done. Lucas Reed had lost me long before I ever opened my eyes in Scarlett Hayes' body. I turned back to Vanessa. Enjoy your downfall, I said quietly. Then without another word I walked past them both. Out of the room. Out of their lives. Out of the past that had been holding me hostage for far too long. The air outside was cool against my skin as I stepped onto the street, my heartbeat steady, my mind clear. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened and Damien sat inside, waiting. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable, and said, "Is it done?" I met his gaze. Yes. And for the first time in a long, long time I felt free.